From the San Antonio Express News, this is The Docket with courts and crime reporter Elizabeth Zavala as she breaks down the trials in the Bexar County Courthouse. I'm Joy Marie Scott. Now, you may recall a couple years back in 2017 that word of a serial rapist in the medical center had residents across the city on edge. 6 separate sexual offenses dating back to 2015 led to an SAPD investigation of Anton Jamail Harris. Many of us were shocked to see he was a high school student. Now, Harris is 20 years old, and this week he agreed to a plea deal worked out between his defense attorneys and the DA. But the judge is not entirely on board, and he expressed some concerns. So, Liz, tell us what's going on.
Yes, Joy, as you mentioned, this case frightened and riveted San Antonio for some time, especially people who lived in the medical center area. So Judge Frank Castro, who's the presiding judge of the 399th State District Court, has set a pre-sentence investigation hearing for August 20th to hear testimony from witnesses regarding the accusations against Anton Harris.
And just explain to us what happens at a pre-sentence investigation. What is that like?
Well, the pre-sentence investigation hearings that I have been to occur whenever there is a plea agreement. And so, when you don't have a trial, you have to basically have some sort of setup that is before a judge so that you can listen to what evidence the prosecutors have and what evidence the defense has, and also give the judge an opportunity to review the case and to also look over the evidence and also hear witnesses. So that pre-sentence investigation happens in a courtroom, and many times it happens just right there in front of the judge's bench. Sometimes you have a defendant who is standing by his lawyers, and then on the other side you have the prosecutors. And in some instances you can have witnesses also standing there who are sworn in by the judge so that they can testify.
So the crimes that Harris is charged with, they occurred, they go all the way back to when he was 16. And these alleged crimes reflect a kind of a progression, a progression of a predator who became kind of increasingly confident in the attacks as time went on. So can you tell us about the pattern?
Sure. As you mentioned, Anton Harris was arrested when he was 18, and San Antonio police arrested him, and he was charged with sexual assault. And at the time of this arrest, an arrest affidavit stated that Harris admitted that he had sexually assaulted several women dating back to 2015 and told authorities he used a gun or a knife in some of the attacks. And, you mentioned earlier in the program he was a high school student. He actually was arrested 2 days after he graduated from Marshall High School. So the first attack happened March 19th, 2015, according to court documents. And in this instance, Harris allegedly confessed to groping a 28-year-old woman in an aggressive manner as she returned home to her apartment. And the next assault happened, allegedly, August 16th, 2015. And a woman told police she was followed to her apartment complex on Oakdale Way, and she heard footsteps behind her. And when she turned around, she briefly saw a man who put a T-shirt over her face, put her in a headlock, and dragged her to an apartment where she was able to claw his face until he let her go, and she escaped. Now, it was that clawing of his face where people were able to begin to collect DNA, which they took from under her fingernails. And the affidavit stated that the next alleged attack that Harris was linked to happened on June 3rd of 2016, this time on Oakdale Way. A woman said she heard scratching on her door, and when she opened it, a man holding a long metallic knife with a wooden handle forced his way in, told her to shut up or he would kill her, and then she was sexually assaulted.
And these allegations are terrifying, and it's still shocking to remember that he was a teenager. And I remember when photos of him as he was arrested came out, he just looked so clean cut. And he's actually, when he was arrested, he was wearing a T-shirt with two, furry kittens and a basketball hoop. And it's such a disconnect to think of him connected to these crimes.
It really is, Joy. It's incredible all the way around. Frightening for these victims, and also, you mentioned the young man. To see this young man, he looks just like you'd expect: young, bright-eyed, fit. If you see him smile, he looks just like an average teen. But yes, there were more attacks that were investigated by San Antonio police. In December of 2016, another woman was assaulted at an apartment in the medical center area, and she told authorities she felt someone was actually playing around with her because there was knocking at her door, and she would ask, who's there, and there would not be a response. And she told authorities that, this happened for a little while. And she went to take a shower, and when she got out, the knocking started again, but yet still when she would call out, there was no reply. And when it happened another time, she opened the door, again expecting to see no one or maybe finding someone doing a prank. But this time, a masked man met her at knife point at the door, pushed her inside, stole her money, and raped her in the bedroom. So by this time, another attack happened in January of 2017, and this also at an apartment complex near the medical center on North Knoll. The victim told police that she saw a man behind her as she entered her apartment, and that he pointed a gun to her chest, pushed her inside, stole her money, and sexually assaulted her. So about 4 months later, on May 19th, same year, a 23-year-old woman was attacked but not raped when a man assaulted her as she was getting out of her car at her apartment on Hebner Road. And this victim told police a man pushed her up against her car and held a knife to her. Her thumb was cut, but at that moment, and talk about just divine intervention, at that moment, a car drove by, and that seemed to stop any further assault or attack. So this 23-year-old woman was able to not be attacked because a car passed by. So police say that Harris admitted to raping another woman on May 28th of 2017 at a complex on Babcock Road. And that woman said she was raped at gunpoint and that her iPhone and iPad were stolen after the attack. So, these cases are already many more than the 5 that he has, at this point, pleaded guilty to. But police said Harris confessed in great detail, not just about that May 28th, 2017 attack, but also about the other ones. So all around, just a really, really sad state of affairs because, again, Anton Harris had just graduated from Marshall High School, where he had been a reserve guard for the varsity basketball team while he was there.
So today there is a plea deal before a judge, and you've covered plea agreements on the docket before for other cases. What does this one in particular entail, and can you elaborate on the judge's concerns?
Yes, Joy. So what we know at this point is that defense attorneys Jonathan Watkins and Monica E. Guerrero are representing Anton Jamel Harris. Now, they've been working with prosecutor Daryl Harris, who is on District Attorney Joe Gonzalez's team, on the agreement. And this was presented to Judge Castro in court. Now, aggravated sexual assault is a first-degree felony punishable by 5 to 99 years or life in prison. So if Anton Harris were to go to trial, he would face up to life in prison on each charge. The plea agreement called for him to plead guilty to the 5 aggravated sexual assault charges, and the aggravated robbery charge would be dismissed, and the prison term at this point looks like it would be for a maximum of 40 years, with Anton Harris eligible for parole after serving half of that time. But when we were in court for that hearing, Judge Castro appeared visibly concerned, and he told the court that he may or may not sign off on that offer. He expressed concern for the amount of time and for the victims involved. So at this point, if Anton Harris goes to prison on a 40-year term, he would be eligible for parole after 20 years, at which time he would be about 40 years old. Now, eligibility is not a guarantee for parole, but when people hear that defendants could get out in half of the time, it does raise eyebrows.
So, okay, the DA, they have Anton Harris has confessed and to 5 of the charges, of the assault charges, and there's DNA linking him to the cases. Why would there be a negotiation for a plea deal when, if they have evidence and they have a confession? Why wouldn't they just go to trial?
Well, Joy, I've spoken to defense attorneys about this a lot, and defense attorneys are there for the defendant, for their client. And, prosecutors are there representing the victims and representing the state. So, prosecutors are going to want to go to trial because they're going to want to have a jury of one's peers, decide guilt, innocence, and punishment in a case. But you also have to consider that on the other side of that, a defense attorney is going to want to see what they can do to try to get, the least amount of time. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but just in seeing how some cases move through the courts, I would think that maybe the 40 years here might be something that the defense is going to look at because of the age of their client. He's 20 years old now, and with good behavior in prison and the potential to be eligible for parole after 20 years, that actually could look like a very attractive thing to the defense. Now, for prosecutors, without talking with them, and I'm maybe trying to get into people's heads, but just in my experience watching how things happen in court, it seems that they would want to do whatever they possibly could to get someone off the streets that they consider would be a danger to the community. In this particular case, you've got a lot of DNA, you've got witnesses, you have a confession. 40 years is going to mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But in this particular case, already before he has been convicted and sentenced, there seems to be eyes on this case as well, even from the judge who said at the get-go that he wasn't sure. He wanted to think about it a little bit before he makes a decision.
So what should we expect in August 20 when Anton Harris is back in court?
Well, as we have just said it sounds like things are still a little unclear. But if this goes like other cases do, we should expect on August 20th, when the PSI hearing occurs, that we'll hear some witnesses, possibly victims, and people who might have seen something or some type of behavior around the times that some of these alleged incidents occurred. And the defense could have their own witnesses. It's possible that the defense could call people to speak on his young age or character. I mean, it could go any number of ways. And as one of the defense attorneys told me, in the end, it's up to the judge's discretion as to whether to take the deal. Monica Guerrero said if Judge Castro decides not to accept this plea agreement, she and Jonathan Watkins would be ready to go to trial. So we will know more on August 20th, and maybe we'll be discussing this again.
Definitely. We will be following this with you. You can read Elizabeth Zavala's reporting on this case and follow all of her reporting on courts and crime issues in the Bexar County at expressnews.com. From the San Antonio Express News, this is The Docket. I'm Joy Marie Scott.